Man, get a load of this. This is a real eye-opener. While he's probably not one of the most popular, he's definitely one of the most well-known American politicians of our time. Bernie Sanders appeared on the Theo Vaughn show, and I want you to hear what he says about the possibility of there being no democracy. And when people are talking about democracy, they're talking about fair elections. Listen to what Bernie Sanders says when Theo Vaughn talks about how he got a raw deal in the 2016 election when he was running against Hillary Clinton. Check this out and pay attention because every American needs to hear this.
You know, I ran in 16, I ran against Hillary Clinton, and I ran in 20.
Yeah, I remember, and I felt like you didn't get treated fairly, to be honest with you.
Well, I didn't, and that's what happens when you take on the establishments.
Yeah.
So what happened to free and fair? We need to preserve free and fair elections. Bernie Sanders said he didn't get treated fairly. If Bernie Sanders didn't get treated fairly, maybe other politicians who the American people elected didn't get treated fairly. And if they didn't get treated fairly, how many more people aren't getting treated fairly? And who's manipulating the entire show behind the scenes? Listen to this again.
I felt like you didn't get treated fairly, to be honest with you.
Well, I didn't, and that's what happens when you take on the establishments.
Yeah.
So what happened is...
He didn't get treated fairly because that's what happens when you take on the establishment. Wait a second. I thought it was just the American people and the politicians that they're voting for. I thought those are the only two players in the entire election equation. You mean there are other people who exert influence over American elections, according to Bernie Sanders, who he would know? I would consider him as an insider. He's somebody who actually ran for president. He saw what happened behind the curtain, and now he's admitting it on Theo Vaughn's show.
We won the first three primaries, and then the establishment got very, very nervous, and there were a whole lot of candidates in the Democratic primary. And they said, hey, it'd be a good idea if you all dropped out, let Joe Biden be the one candidate. People rallied around him.
And do they...
Wait a minute. He won the first three primaries, which means the will of the people, the politicians, the politician, in this case Bernie Sanders, that the people wanted, got railroaded by an unseen force called the establishment. And we live in an arena where there's supposed to be democracy. And Bernie Sanders, knowing this, still promotes the idea of democracy as though it did exist when he's admitting it really doesn't. This is perplexing. It's confusing. But wait, we're not done yet. We're just getting warmed up.
And do they call? Is there a call that you get, and it's like you're not going to move forward? Is it just like news articles? Like how does the establishment?
Well, what happens
work?
is I won the popular vote in Iowa. I won the New Hampshire primary. I won the Nevada primary, and those were the first three. And then front pages of the New York Times, Democratic establishment very nervous. Bernie Sanders could win the whole. We were doing very well in the polls. And, I think behind the scenes.
If I didn't know any better, I would say this behind the scenes language sounds a lot like what Edward Bernays wrote in his book Propaganda when he said, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. And then he says, those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. And it says at the end of this quote here, it is they who pull the wires which control the public mind.
Behind the scenes, people thought, there were like 15 different candidates, and they were splitting up the vote. And that's how I was not necessarily getting over 50%. I was getting more than other people. So I was on the way to victory. And they said, look, Bernie shouldn't be the candidate for a variety of reasons. We don't want him the candidate. Drop out. And then on one day, a lot of people, 1 or 2 days, a lot of people dropped out. It was Joe Biden and me, and Joe had a lot of support, and all these people came behind him. And
you wait, before we go any further, you mean to tell me that the American people who think they have a voice and then let their voice be heard during the primaries, in which he won all three, according to Bernie. The American people said, we want Bernie. The establishment said, we want Biden. And then Biden was installed as president within this thing we call democracy, which is tantamount in their minds to freedom. And that's a free and fair election? Wait, what's going on here? But wait, there's more.
Do you think that our election process is still democratic? Do you think it's still...
Yes and no. I mean,
It can't be yes and no. It's either got to be yes or no. It can't be both. Is there freedom to vote and install a president by the will of the people, or does it happen by the will of the billionaires who are the donors who are backing the candidate that they want up there? Which one is it? It's either one or the other. It can't be both. It can't be the will of the people and the will of the donors. It can't be yes and no for democracy. It's got to be yes for democracy or no for democracy, right? What am I missing here? Listen to this.
You want to run for office. Can you? Yeah, you can. You got a certain number of signatures. But if you're going to win, and I have 10 times more money than you do, I will beat you 95% of the time.
Wow.
I mean, that's a fact, right?
Right, 100%.
You'll beat me maybe if you're really an exceptional candidate and I'm a real idiot, you will beat me once in a while. But by and large, the money people will win. So if you're asking me, are we a democracy? In one sense, we are. All right, you can run for office. You can raise your issues. On the other hand, in terms of who has the real power, money people do. And I use the term oligarchy.
So Bernie's saying, just so I break this down, so it's very, very clear, there's democracy in the sense that you can run, but you're not going to win. Then what's the point of running if the cards are stacked against you and everybody who's got the money, the big bucks, are throwing all their money behind the candidate who's going to end up winning? Sure, you can run. So in that sense, there's not democracy because it's an illusion. It's a disturbing illusion, I would say. And this is all Bernie's saying all this. I'm not saying all this. This is a guy who's a part of government saying this. But he's not done.
An oligarchy is a society where small numbers of very wealthy people control the economic and political life of the country. I think we are moving rapidly in that direction.
The economic and political life of the country is being run and controlled by very few people who've got more money than the bottom 98%.
Yeah, I feel like to me, it feels like a almost privatized communism in a way.
Right. That's a very good point. It's an interesting way of looking at it.
Now, here's what Bernie Sanders says at the DNC, talking about this topic.
We're laying the groundwork for Kamala Harris to become our next president.
Does this mean that Bernie is a part of the machine based on what Chris Cuomo said the other day from the floor of the DNC, that the people who've got the big boxes, the big suites, overlooking and looking down on the people on the floor of the DNC, those are the ones money talks and American voters walk?
A big theme here at the DNC is that they're going to go after corporate gouging, and they're going to go after corporations. They're going after the elites. Greg, look at the ring of suites. There is a game of money. When people talk about uniparty, we are strangled by the money reality in our politics. Those suites start at 500 grand. You think there's like a teacher group up in there? Why do you think I'm on the floor? That's the game. You pay to play. Those boxes are filled with the same people that they say they're going to regulate. They're going to change how it is. They are looking down from on high at the people who make the difference in their communities. And that is the reality of politics. The most dangerous money in politics is now legal money because of Citizens United. You've got to know this. The idea that they can fight against it is almost laughable.
Is this what we're talking about? Because if that's the case, and if what Bernie said to Theo Vaughn is true, then Bernie's actually playing a part of the game on the non-democracy side and on the pro-billionaire side. But he's not done. Listen to this.
At the very top of that to-do list is the need to get big money out of our political process.
So as he speaks at the DNC, which is controlled by these big money oligarchs who have the $500,000 4-day suites above the DNC, Bernie is speaking in the context of those big money fat cats in control of the political and economic wheels and gears of America. But he's not done yet.
Billionaires in both parties should not be able to buy elections, including primary elections.
But the implication is, until that happens, it's happening right now. Until we root them out, which they have no intention of doing, by the way. Bernie says he does, but he's working within the framework of a democracy that's controlled by the few billionaires at the top. But until they go, they're here. And by Bernie's own testimony, he's being controlled by them and is actually speaking on behalf of them within the framework of what is known as the uniparty system, just like Chris Cuomo called it, of the Democrat and Republican Party, in this case, the Democrat Party on the floor of the DNC.
For the sake of our democracy, we must overturn the disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision.
Now, in case you don't know what that is, the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, let me just show you real quick. The court held 5-4 that the freedom of speech clause of the First Amendment prohibits the government from restricting independent expenditures for political campaigns by corporations, nonprofit organizations, labor unions, and other associations. But then you got this right here. And this is what Bernie was talking about on Theo Vaughn's podcast. January 1st, 2020 will mark a decade since the Supreme Court's ruling in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, a controversial decision that reversed century-old campaign finance restrictions and enabled corporations that Bernie's talking about and other outside groups to spend unlimited funds on elections. So they have the money to control who becomes the president of the United States, who will in turn set the policies that are beneficial to the donors who gave the money for the person to become the president of the United States. And I want the YouTube algorithms to know that none of this came from me. All of this came from the words of a sitting member of Washington's District of Criminals, Senator Bernie Sanders. So you tell me, does your vote count? Based on what Bernie Sanders said, based on what we saw in the 2016 election, based on the emails that were revealed by, what was it called, Guccifer 2.0, where they were revealing that the people in the DNC did not want Bernie Sanders to become the nominee, so they were throwing all their weight behind Hillary Clinton. Leave your thoughts about this for the world and the global thought police in the comment section below. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody. Know if you view these videos as valuable and you think people could benefit by hearing it, share it, give it a like, grab a shirt, become a channel member, but more importantly, understand that in times of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. I'll see you in the next video.